There's some books along with some magazines, TV shows, and different trips I've taken around the country that got me back on the trail a few years ago. Now, I live a lot of my hiking dreams through others' adventures in these books and many of the excellent hiking and backpacking channels on YouTube. And there's some really good stuff out there, and don't hesitate to check it out. But I just wanted to share with you a few of the books that got me going, both past and present, and they're a lot of fun to dig into, so let's check them out. Now, this first one here, The Complete Walker by Colin Fletcher, and I'll bet you a quarter my buddy Tony over at Blue Collar Backcountry knows about this book. I only mention this book because this is how I first got interested in backpacking back in the mid-70s. The first edition came out, I think, in like 64, and since then there's been 3 updates, 3 editions in all. This happens to be 4th edition. Back then we had no REI, no Backpacker magazine, no Outside magazine, and Al Gore had yet to invent the internet, so we were just kind of stuck with books. And I got this one and read it cover to cover back in 1965. I was working at a large sporting goods chain called Culliman Bourne Sporting Goods here in Texas, and we had a small camping and backpacking department. I started out with a little Jerry one-man pup tent, Boy Scout external frame backpack, and a big old heavy aluminum cook kit and a Sierra cup, and off I went with only the knowledge that came out of this book. I have this strictly for sentimental value, and I really wouldn't recommend anyone buying it unless you find it for, $1 or $2 in your used bookstore. And maybe you're feeling a bit nostalgic, and it's kind of fun to look through some of the old stuff that they recommend, because the technology, trust me, is much different than it was back then. Back in the day, this was known as the Hiker's Bible. And there's some great YouTube channels along with Backpacker magazine that should be able to keep you up to date on all the latest gear in the world of hiking and backpacking. So something like this, or pretty much any book that comes out on hiking gear and stuff, is really outdated about as soon as it hits the shelf. So I think YouTube and some of the great magazines we have out there will take care of it. So much for being nostalgic, but let's get going with some of the fun reading. Into the Wild by Jon Krakauer. I had just finished his book Into Thin Air, and which was about the tragedy on Mount Everest, and I liked it so much that I grabbed just another one of his books. I love reading about people's outdoor adventures, and the young man in this story had a big one in mind. Let me just read you here on the cover real quick in case you don't know about the story. In April 1992, a young man from a well-to-do family hitchhiked to Alaska and walked alone into the wilderness north of Mount McKinley. His name was Christopher Johnson McCandless. He had given $25,000 in savings to charity, abandoned his car and most of his possessions, burned all his cash in his wallet, and invented a new life for himself. Pretty cool story. I vaguely remember it, reading about it, in a magazine or something, but I didn't know the whole thing, so I grabbed the book and I thought it was pretty cool. And this guy came from a good family, and he's a super sharp kid, but he just didn't quite fit into the mold of the typical young American male. He had his own ideas and dreams, and he was bound and determined to follow them, and that dream led him to his own expedition to, of all places, Alaska. The story that he made his way across the country to the ultimate starting point, and his friends and the people he met along the way, is some really interesting reading. Even though he was highly intelligent and a little bit eccentric, he was completely clueless about the magnitude of an expedition going to Alaska. Unaware of the preparation or the gear he needed for his trip into the wilderness, he also ignored most of the advice he got along the way as well. I also felt, while I was reading this, I'm basically just yelling at him in my mind that he needed, this piece of gear or that piece of gear, or, to survive this, you're going to need that. And I just continued to question myself the entire time I read this book, why such a sharp young man with so much ahead of him and so much intelligence could just ignore all common sense. And even though this book is quite dark in places, it still made me want to go out on my own adventure just like he did, although with a lot more preparation. Now, this book was made into a movie. I've never seen it. I'm going to probably rent it on Netflix or something, but I recommend the book. And it's also pretty small, pretty thin, you can pack along with you. So catch this on Amazon or say at the dollar store or something. Next book up, A Walk Across America by Peter Jenkins. And you know how when you're on Amazon and you're buying books, and then down below it says, people who bought this book also bought this, and this? That's exactly how I ended up with this book, and it's really a great book. It's about a disillusioned young man fed up with society in the 1970s and decides to walk across America. You know, somehow that might give him some insight into himself and his country. And, you know, I've been a bit confused about my way in life too from time to time when I was young, but I must say walking across America not once crossed my mind, but this guy had a different plan. And on his journey, he meets some pretty cool people, some interesting characters, such as a hermit up in the mountains and a black family that took him in for a while and he lived with them. That was a really cool story. At one time or another, I think we've all wanted to do exactly what Peter Jenkins did. He also traveled with his dog, which also warms my heart because my dog Tater is my hiking buddy now. I had a hard time putting this book down, and I look forward to bedtime every night when I could delve right back into the story where I'd left off the night before, and I would highly recommend it. That's Walk Across America by Peter Jenkins. What's next? Probably hadn't heard of this one either. A Walk for Sunshine. I found this book at the used bookstore that I hang out at and found it by accident on the shelf. And I was pleasantly surprised. This book will take you every step of the way along the 2,160 miles of the Appalachian Trail. And this guy is not a professional rider either. So it's kind of like you're going along with your buddy. And he was driven to do this hike back in '98 to raise money for his brother, who has cerebral palsy and lives in an assisted living home called the Sunshine Home. That's the name. And you'll read all about his preparation and his physical challenges, his agonies, the lessons he learned on the trail, and not only lessons about trail life, but lessons about himself too, and how he now views the world. I found this book quite inspirational and was ready to get out and hit the trail every time I read a chapter. This book helped raise quite a bit of money for the Sunshine House, and he still writes today. Good stuff here. You might want to check it out. I even got a autographed copy, even though I'm not Cindy. Man, he has terrible penmanship. He would have never made it through Catholic school. But anyway, grab that one. Walk for Sunshine. Here's some stuff you've probably heard about. Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson. And everybody, I'm sure, has heard about this book. And in my opinion, it is a must read, and it's one of my personal favorites. It was also made into a movie starring Robert Redford and Nick Nolte, but as with many movies that are made from great books, it wasn't even close to the level that the book was. You know, and it can't be, really. I mean, you're talking about putting, you know, a couple 100-page book into an hour and 50-minute movie. You're just not going to catch all the nuances. And although the middle-aged author, you know, his plan was to hike the entire Appalachian Trail, he was completely unprepared, and his partner even more so, and thus they only hiked, you know, just a portion of it. Both these guys were novice hikers and out of shape, and the author takes you along a real humorous and exciting journey while dragging his old fat ass overweight alcoholic college buddy along, so you can probably see how Nick Nolte got that role. But it was really good. They meet several notable characters along the way, and this book will make you laugh out loud, but it'll also inspire you to get out on the trail. We all know people just like several of these characters. I know I do. And there was rarely a chapter, that I didn't smile or just flat out burst out laughing, just completely unexpected. And sometimes that was the expense, at the expense of my wife, who was trying to sleep next to me. I mean, one time, I'm just trying to, suppress my laughter, and the bed starts shaking. She goes, "What's going on over there?" And I said, "Hey, this crap's funny here. I mean, it's really good." And I enjoyed every single page of this book. And since then, I've read a couple of his other books. He writes a lot about his travels. So, a guy raised in Iowa, lived overseas for about 20 years and came back. And he's really got some good stuff. So this is an excellent book, must read. Grab a copy of Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson. Save the best for last. And of course, we've all heard about Wild by Cheryl Strayed. What can I say here? If you're a backpacker, a hiker, an outdoors walker, whatever you want to call yourself, you've probably read this book, or at least seen the movie, which was actually pretty damn good, starring Reese Witherspoon as Cheryl Strayed. And Laura Dern, another one of my favorite actresses, played her mother. Both top shelf performances. And like Bill Bryson's book I just talked about, Walk in the Woods, this is a New York Times bestseller. And if it means anything to you, it was also a pick for Oprah's book club, whatever that's worth. It's a great memoir of a confused, disillusioned girl in her early 20s. Kind of her world's crumbling around her, and like most youngins like that, they're seeking a change and a challenge in her life, And so with self-destruction looming, she decides, what the hell? I think I'll just go hike the PCT. It's only, 2,650 miles, no big deal. So with no experience, no training, no gear, no clue, off she goes. What could possibly go wrong? So this book is another one that was really hard to put down, and probably the single most reason all the main long distance through hiking trails like the AT, the PCT, and others are somewhat crowded. And I think this book and the movie is in part responsible for the through hiking craze of the last few years or so. And depending on who you ask, this could be a good or a bad thing. I know probably REI and LL Bean, a lot of other people probably enjoy the added sales, but this is a badass story, and it's thoroughly enjoyable, especially from a first-time rider. I think she's an excellent rider. Not only is the journey on the PCT, just great entertainment in and of itself, but the fact that the trail, actually healed her as a person is just, an added bonus. So when we're all sitting around watching endless YouTube videos about meticulous, months-long preparation, about your big long through hike, and obsessing about, should I cut off my toothbrush to save those grams, or should we buy the ultralight $350 one-man tent, or the ultra light one-man tent for $475? Just think about this chick right here. She grabbed a pack that didn't fit, threw a bunch of crap in it she didn't need, and had no idea how to use it, and headed out into the desert. So don't worry, don't overthink it, girly men. Somehow she made it, and you will too. You'll be just fine. So there you have it. Some books that got me back on the trail and excited about being out in the great outdoors. I'm sure there's some special books that you read, so please let me know what inspired you. I always like a good outdoor story. Let me know what you think. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Till next time, you guys be safe. Hope to see you out on the trail. Adios.